Hi, this is Nick on the 26th of July, carrying on this week's theme of leading with inspiration. This is episode 3. I've called it kind of willingly drawing the best out in people, and this is something I think about a lot, and I'm still formulating some of my ideas, so I'm going to formulate them in front of you today. I guess, my belief is, and maybe it's a little bit more complex than this, but really there is two ways to influence each other. Number one is to try and manipulate each other. And the second is to try and inspire each other. And, I've done some work in organisations, and I've done work with organisations, and I've worked for a few organisations in my past. And, it sometimes feels like the prevailing kind of question is, how do we get the best out of people? How do we make people be their best? And how can we, I was going to say force, but that's not necessarily the right word, but it's like, how can we manipulate the best out of people? What levers can we pull? What rewards can we give? Hi Meg, I see you've joined live, thanks, just got your email. How can we get the best out in people? So that often comes down to things like rewards. How can we reward people for giving their best? Or how can we punish them for not giving their best so that they will then give their best? And I wonder if that very paradigm, there is obviously some validity to it, and that comes down to, what I would call motivation. How do we motivate people? But what if we asked a bigger question, which was, well, what would people naturally be inspired to contribute here? And how do we create the conditions in which they can voluntarily and willingly give their best to what we're doing here? And that seems to be a question that most people don't even think to ask. I've got a friend who's a TV producer who I've talked about several times, and in our conversations, she's got a leadership style which is quite unique, and we've had a number of conversations, and every time we kind of go, I ask her, I say, Liz, what is it that you think your job really is? And she said, my job is to find out how to help people draw out the best of themselves and give their best performances, and my job is to create an atmosphere of love in which they can do that. And it's like, wow, what an amazing way to think, that she sees her job as to create a loving workplace where people can bring their creativity, feel safe, and contribute their best performances. And she kind of goes, doesn't everybody think like that? And I go, no, most people don't think like that. Most people are not thinking about, how do I get people to give the performances and the gifts that they would willingly want to give. And I think what actually happens, and I've done a bit of reading and research on this, is actually when people feel like they are being manipulated, they actually don't perform as well. It's almost like the best of us can only be willingly given. And I like this idea, like, I don't, in a way this is me at my peak here, doing these broadcasts. I love doing them every day. Nobody's making me do it. If I was being manipulated into doing them in some way, I would feel icky about doing them. The reason I do them is because I willingly choose to do them. And I think this is the kind of sphere of human activity and leadership that I'm fascinated by, is like, how do leaders create, and when I say leaders, how do we do that for ourselves, and how do we do that for each other? How do we create the conditions where willingly, naturally, and voluntarily we give our best? Because we choose to, because in a funny kind of way we're in charge of ourselves. Even though we may work for somebody else, we say, okay, I may work for you, and I choose what I give here. I'm in charge of what I give here. You cannot manipulate me to give here. I choose what I give. But what if we then, that would create a very different atmosphere. That would be an atmosphere of mutual collaboration, mutual respect, not command and control. And this is where I think, that the whole idea of command and control doesn't work. It's really this skill of creating the conditions in which people voluntarily give their best. And it is about having, a form of inspiring leadership, because I've got a friend who works at the Met Police in London, and we were having this conversation on Sunday, and she was saying, that so much of the leadership that she's experienced in her organisation has been about manipulation, has been about trying to get, use people as resources in a way, and, get the maximum out of people. And she says, that demotivates most people. And she said for the first time in 13 years now, she's got a leader in her organisation that she feels inspired by, and that other people feel inspired by. So people are willingly wanting to give their best because there's more of an inspirational leader rather than a manipulative leader in charge. So yeah, this is a big area. I'm fascinated by it, and I think that's what I'm fascinated by, is how do we, as I say, create these conditions where ourselves willingly want to give our best, and we create those conditions where other people willingly want to give their best. And to me, that accessing the voluntary, willing contribution of what we have to give, that's what fascinates me, is how do we make that happen? How do we cause that to happen for ourselves and for each other? So I hope that's been interesting, stimulated a bit of thinking. So thank you for watching. God bless. I'll be back tomorrow with another broadcast. Bye bye.